Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the 8.24B AD Carry Tier List. So in case you didn't catch it, be sure to check out the patch notes as well for 8.24B and the support tier list for 8.24B. I have them both linked in the Google Doc, which you can find in the description. Also in the Google Doc, you're going to find a little mini guide for each one of the champions we're going to go over. So if you click on the guide, it's got a link to the wiki, which will give you all the statistics about the champion. It's got a 1 to 5 rating system. It's got runes, recommended runes, and recommended items. We're going to go through and talk about some of the different situations where you might switch this up on certain champions. As far as the rating system goes, it's a 1 to 5 scale, 1 being the champion is one of the worst at that task for the role, 5 being the champion is one of the best at that task at that role. So lane pressure is how likely is the champion able to get priority and harass in the lane, how dominant are they during the laning phase. Kill threat is how likely is the champion able to get kills during the laning phase. Safety is how safe is the champion from ganks, how well can the champion position later on, and then reliability is how well does the champion perform over time. How easy is it to create consistent results with the champion, and part of this is how difficult is the champion mechanically to play, but the other part is how well does the champion fit into the meta, are there counter picks available out there. And as always, if you enjoyed this content, you like good, long-form, sort of intellectual engagement with League of Legends, then be sure to like and subscribe. It does help other people find the content, and hit that bell if you want to be alerted every time I release a new video. Also stream most nights starting around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so come check it out. We have a wonderful, fun, chill community. I try to be as interactive as I can while I'm streaming. Okay, and as always, this tier list is intended for a Plat minus audience, so usually like Plat, Gold, and Silver intention, although I still think it can be relevant into Diamond and can certainly still be relevant into Bronze and Iron, but once you start getting near the kind of extremes of the ELO brackets, then the meta does change a little bit, so just be aware of that. So let's go ahead and get in here. All right, Tier 1 is going to be Lucian. I mean, he's overpowered. He needs to be nerfed. I think pretty much anybody's going to have him as Tier 1. He just does too many things. Like, he's really powerful early. He scales well later. He has a very unique and interesting build path, which is extremely powerful. So he has one of the strongest 1 and 2 item power spikes in the game. First, he's going to get Blade of the Ruined King. You know, and he scales extremely well with that because each one of his double shots is going to apply the Blade of the Ruined King passive. So he basically gets a double bonus out of that. And then he's going to get Black Cleaver, which not only gives him a decent amount of AD, but it also gives him a lot of HP. So he's harder to blow up than a lot of the other AD carries out there. So, you know, champions like Graves and Kha'Zix, if they aren't super fed, are going to have a little bit of a harder time chewing through him because he gets that extra 400 health. And that's going to give him extra movement speed to help him kite them out a little bit better or to help him chase people down. He applies Black Cleaver really easily because each one of his abilities and the double shot also applies Cleaver, and each one of his ultimate shots can apply Cleaver as well. So if you just shower this into a team fight, then you're going to shred everybody's armor. That's going to help your teammates like Kha'Zix, you know, like Rengar, Talon, Fiora, all of those AD champs that are super popular right now. They're going to be able to chew through the enemy a lot faster because you're shredding their armor really quickly with your ultimate with Black Cleaver. He also runs Press the Attack, which is another thing that buffs your whole team because whenever you trigger Press the Attack on somebody, everybody on your team does 12% more damage. So it actually makes him pretty good against tanks as well. So that's the thing about him is he can blow up squishies really well with his early game combos, his really high base damage. He has a great single item power spike, double item power spike, and he has 2 different things that can shred tanks, right? He's got the Blade of the Ruined King, and he's got Press the Attack, and he has Black Cleaver. So he can also go a defensive boot like a Ninja Tabby, which will further give him extra safety, extra dueling power, because he's primarily a combo-based AD carry and doesn't rely as much on having really high attack speed. So he's just super strong right now. He's got a great laning phase. You know, he scales better, or he scales well into the late game. He's very mobile. He's relatively tanky compared to most AD carries. So he's overpowered. I would first pick or ban him every single time if you can. And that's borne out in the statistics, too. If you look at the stats for this patch, you're going to see Lucian 52.5%, you know, 29% ban rate, 31% pick rate. So, yeah, everybody and their mother's playing Lucian, and for good reason. He's super strong right now. Okay. So, yeah, it's just Press the Attack, Triumph, Alacrity, Coup de Grace, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, and then you can get Berserker Greaves or Ninja Tabby if you want to, then Ruined King, Black Cleaver, and then if it comes down to it, you can start shifting into crit at the end game with Rapid Fire and Infinity Edge. Although, frankly, most games are going to be over by the time you get these 3 items. Okay, let's look at the next one. Actually, I want to shuffle this up just a little bit here from how I originally had it. I want to move the mages up. The reason is, I just feel like most AD carries are just really bad right now, honestly. Like, I've been trying to, be an apologist for AD carries, but if I'm being honest, looking in most of my games, the AD carry is not determining who's winning these games most of the time. It's almost always jungler, mid, or top. And some, the support as well. Like, I feel like I have a pretty good impact just because I can always create vision, I can roam, I can itemize to help out other people around the map. So I think supports are still, like, very useful, and you can definitely climb a support. Just AD carry feels really, really bad unless you're Lucian right now, basically. So I want to move the mages up a little bit. And you can see this statistically as well. Particularly Cassiopeia is having a pretty high win rate, 54%, and then Karthus is too. They aren't played as much, but they're very, very strong in this meta for a couple of reasons. So I talked about this in the last patch notes for AD carry, but I'll talk about it again here really quickly. So what's up with a champion like Cassiopeia? Why are we just now seeing her in the bot lane? And why haven't we seen her in the past? And why are people playing her over AD carry, right? So if we think about historically, why do people pick AD carries? Like, what's the purpose of picking an AD carry? There's primarily 3 different things, right? Like, one is tower taking capabilities, right? So you need someone who's long ranged, physical damage so that they can take down towers quickly. Well, that's not as important right now, because if you have Baron, you're going to take all the towers. So you can just force a team fight around Baron, or force a split push. You can just make different sort of tactical decisions around Baron so that you never have to sit there and ARAM and try to siege down a tower. That almost never happens in games these days. It's always somebody gets picked and then everybody else goes and grabs a tower afterwards. So not as much of an issue, but not sure if we can find it here. But they did change this back on patch like 8.12, which was, or like it was 8.9, I think, which was before the mages came back into bot lane. And a lot of people didn't cover this change, but it was a really huge deal. I talked about it, of course. But a lot of other people did not. Let's see, where is this change here? Okay, so that's a big turret change in the preseason. Okay, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. So basic AP ratio against turrets was increased by from 50% to 60%, and if a basic attack uses the ability power bonus to turrets, then the whole attack will convert to magic damage rather than only the ability power portion. So this was a really, really big deal for mages taking towers, and like I said, it went under the radar, and I would venture to guess most people didn't even know that AP affects how much damage mages do to towers. Like, you can see it sometimes if you see like something with a really high AP ratio attacking towers, but you might, people may have thought, well, that's just Lich Bane hitting the tower. It is Lich Bane, but it's also your AP converts over to damage. So if your AP, if this 0.6 does more damage than your physical attack, so if you have no AD, then you have 200 AP at some point in the game, that 120 damage you would do to the tower, that 60% ratio, that one's going to take precedent. That one's going to do the, you're going to do that 120 magic damage rather than whatever your AD is, right? If you have like 80 AD and 200 AP, you're going to be doing the 120 AP damage rather than the 80 physical damage, right? And now it is converted all the way over to magic damage. And why is this important? Spell penetration applies to towers. So when you get your Morellonomicon or your Sorcerer boots, obviously you're not going to get boots on Cassiopeia, but with most champions, when you get that, then you're going to be doing a ton of extra damage to towers. And so that actually, this change does help mages siege towers a lot more than before. But you don't really have to siege towers in this meta, as I said before. Okay, well, what else? Why else would people pick AD carries? Well, you need someone who can take objectives reliably and quickly, right? So someone who can slam down the Baron. And Cassiopeia does that very, very well. She can put the poison on him and just spam her E, and she shreds Baron faster than almost any other mage out there, right? Other than aside from like Azir or maybe Ryze. Like, she does Barons really, really quickly. And Dragons. So she fulfills that role. And then finally, you need sustained damage just in case they have a tank. Then you're going to be able to cut through them. Now, they have invented some items, mostly Adaptive Helm, that tanks can get that'll help you out against things like Cassiopeia, Ryze, and Azir, but a lot of people just aren't playing tanks anyways, and if they are, you know, you can still find ways to cut through them with stuff like Void Staff and whatever, and you can kite them out really well. So Cassiopeia is very, very good against tanks also. And she does magic damage, which is very good right now because in a lot of roles, you're seeing AD everywhere. Almost every jungler's AD, with the exception of like Eve and Elise is kind of coming back a little bit. But most junglers are still AD. Most top laners are AD. And I would say about, you know, a third to half of the time, the mid laner is AD. And so being able to pick a mage in the bot lane like Cassiopeia who can fulfill these other AD carry roles and deal AP really helps out with balancing team composition sometimes. So that's why mages in general are going to be stronger. The types of mages that fulfill those roles that I just talked about, like pretty good at shredding tanks, great at taking objectives, like Karthus and Cassiopeia are going to be very good. But what specifically about Cassiopeia? Why is she trending upward? She did get 2 nerfs on this patch, but I've played her some, and I really think that she's still super strong. So these nerfs were well-deserved. She was oppressively powerful in the last patch, and she's still going to be oppressively powerful in this patch, because what this did pretty much is it increased her mana cost later on. Like early on, it's not going to matter as much. You know, at tier 3, you're going to be losing 10 mana, which is when it's going to hurt the most before you get your lost chapter on your first back, you know, around level 5 or 6. But it's just 10 more mana per Q at level 5. It's the same at level 1. And so, you know, you might end up spending like 50 or 60 extra mana, so you might lose 1 Noxious Blast off of this during the laning phase. But it's not something that you have to spam, right? You can use this to harass, but you can also just kind of last hit with your E, which saves you a lot of mana as well. And then the base damage, once again, is not going to matter early. It's like, yeah, you're losing 10 damage off of this. It's okay. It's probably not going to matter. You are losing 20 later on, which does matter, but most of your damage later on is going to be your E anyways. You know, hitting them with your Noxious Blast and then spamming your E on them is still going to be the majority of your damage. So I think that's fair. So this kind of hurts her late game more than anything else, but you're already going to have like a Luden's Echo at this point, and you're not going to be spamming your spells as much. You're going to be waiting for team fights. And so that mana is not going to be as much of an issue, and this does hurt your damage, but you know, once again, you had an excess of damage in the late game anyways. So she's still going to be strong. And the new technology that people have figured out about Cassiopeia are these runes right here, where you go Comet in particular. And the thing about Comet that people had never really considered about Cassiopeia is that her poison applies damage over time. Let me see League runes here really quickly. And so that's going to reduce the cooldown on Comet by 5% for every tick of poison that you have. And each one of your E's is going to reduce it by an additional 20%. And your E is on a 0.75 cooldown, so you can just spam it. So what this means is that your Comet is going to be on, you know, in the mid to late game on like a 3 to 4 second cooldown tops. And so it's going to be up a lot. So you can trigger in a lot of fights, you're going to be able to trigger 2 or 3 Comets. And so that kind of damage adds up quickly over time, and that's very strong. Now, a lot of people had taken Phase Rush on her, which doesn't give you any extra AP. It does give you move speed, though, but if you're maxing Q first, which is what people are doing now, then you're already going to be getting an extra 20% movement speed whenever you hit people with your Q. And the thing about E is most of its damage is based on level. You know, this base damage is based on level, and it's based on your AP ratio. So it's got a, you know, 0.7 AP ratio. So yeah, you're losing out on this little bit of bonus damage, but you're basically paying 10 mana to get 20 damage, which is not a very good value proposition in the long run. That would be like paying, you know, 100 mana to do 200 damage, if you think about that in terms of spells. That's a ridiculous cost. Like this right here is paying 90 mana to do 255 damage. So this is a much better value proposition than this. And that's why people have switched out. So this gives you much better mana management, so you don't have to get tier early, you don't have to get rod early. You can just go straight into Ludens and then straight into some other powerhouse item after that, usually like a Leandri's or a Rylai's, or it's a Death Cap if you're really far ahead. Flat AP is extremely powerful on her because she has great ratios. She has an 80 on her Q. She has a 0.7 on an ability that has a less than a 1 second cooldown, and it affects how much she gets healed. So if you have 200 AP, you know, you're going to be getting healed for, you know, at level 9, you're going to be getting healed for 33 every time you cast Twin Fang, which definitely adds up quite a bit. So, and then she just does a lot of base damage for is relative to ADs in the bot lane. I just talked about how ADs are just so slow. They require so many items unless it's Lucian or maybe Draven or Jhin. It just takes so long to come online, whereas, you know, champions like Cassiopeia and Karthus, they just do a lot of damage immediately. I mean, that's why Lucian's strong too, because his spells do damage. You don't have to auto-attack that much. And that's a thing in this meta where you just don't have time to auto. You know, people are dying in like under 2 seconds constantly. Like most fights are done in 2 seconds because there's so much front-loaded burst. And so having a champion that can put out relatively faster damage but can play the long game, you know, can do large sustained damage but also has pretty respectable burst for a bot laner is going to make her a lot stronger. Now, traditionally, why people would not pick Cassiopeia bot lane, well, part of it was the mana management. She was thought, you know, the common wisdom was you had to have blue, you had to have tier and rod, and that's just going to take too long to come online. We just talked about why that's changed. The other reason is that she scales based on level, so her movement speed is based on level, and then also her E, her Twin Fang, is based on level. So the fact that you're splitting experience with someone in the bot lane feels bad in that respect. But another major weakness of Cassiopeia is she's vulnerable, right? She doesn't have dashes, she doesn't have flashes, and so she can get ganked and killed in the mid lane if you get flanked, right? And because she can't buy boots, she's going to be slower as well. So she's just really vulnerable. But being in the bot lane, you can have a support with you, right? Who's going to ward for you, who can peel for you, who can do all of this stuff that combos together really well with, you know, what you have going on. Let me let the cat in real quick here. Okay, come on. All right, my daughter was trying to get in here earlier, and she just starts, you know, rummaging through stuff. So I closed the door so she'd hang out with my wife instead. But we'll let the cat in. Okay, so that's why. That's why you're seeing Cassiopeia bottom, is that people have figured out how to manage her mana better. She does really high sustained damage. She has more poke damage early on, and she gets the protection of supports in the bot lane so that she can scale up safely. Oh, here comes Rory's like, what the heck? You're letting the cat in, but you're not letting me in? And the Comet change. So you just want to go Comet, Mana Flow, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, and then just Taste of Blood and Ravenous Hunter are going to give you pretty good sustain in the laning phase. And then just Ludens, Morellonomicon, Liandry's. I just like to go... You go Ludens for the mana early on. That's mandatory. Morellonomicon is nice because once you get Oblivion Orb, then you're going to have a really nice spike in damage because of how Spell Pin works, which I talk about in the mid lane tier list video if you want to watch that. That's why almost everybody goes for Sork Boots and Oblivion Orb as fast as possible, because Spell Pin's overpowered as far as a stat right now. It's very under budget. You get a huge value for your gold. Morellonomicon is another thing in the bot lane that's very useful because you're going to be seeing a resurgence of things like Soraka, Sona, Janna. A lot of these healing mages, Nami, are going to start coming into vogue a little bit more because they just buffed all their Forbidden Idol items on this patch. And so having someone who can get Morello in the bot lane pretty quickly against those types of champs is going to be very helpful. I mean, I guess in theory, after you get Lost Chapter, you could just go for Morello then and then finish your Ludens after that if you want to, if they have something like a Soraka. So you don't have to go as far out of your way. You know, if you're an AD carry, you have to buy Executioner's Calling if you want to do that, which is like 800 gold out of your way. It doesn't build in anything useful in the early game. And so that's kind of feels bad and slows down your build a lot if you're an AD carry trying to deal with a Soraka or a Nami or a Sona or something like that. Versus someone like Cassiopeia can do that relatively easily with an item that she wants to get anyways. Now you have to complete the whole item to get the debuff. But that is just another piece of utility in this specific meta that makes her useful. So I think she's great. I'd rather have a competent Cassiopeia than pretty much any other AD carry in the bot lane, except for like a proficient Lucian, perhaps. But going to be very strong. Okay, Karthus, similar. You've been seeing a lot of Karthus in Challenger level play lately. I called the Karthus, talked about it right when Dark Harvest came out. Even before then, before we'd even seen Dark Harvest on live, I was saying Karthus was going to be really good with this. Just because he synergizes so well with Presence of Mind and with Dark Harvest and with Ultimate Hunter. So, you know, big thing about Karthus, very similar in profile to Cassiopeia, where he does high sustained damage off of his Q, which has a low base mana cost, and he gets mana refunded every time he kills something with Defile. So he has excellent mana management early, and similar also to, you know, what we saw with Cassiopeia, is people are going away from any sort of tier build or Rod of the Ages build, and they're just going straight for Ludens as fast as possible. So you get a bigger power spike, and you can move right into your damage items much sooner. So same deal with Karthus. You just want to go Ludens as fast as possible, and then after that, you have a couple of options. Typically, it'll be something like a Morellonomicon or just straight going into a Death Cap. Let's see what people are building on him. For a little bit there, people were going Liandry's, but that's because Liandry's could trigger Dark Harvest, but they changed that a patch or two ago. Excuse me. But yeah, I think it's just double pin. It's just like Sork Boots, Morellonomicon, Ludens, I would say, in most cases. Now, some people are trying him in the jungle, which is interesting. It kind of makes sense if you can kite really well with your Qs. But yeah, I mean, just going for big damage items. Yeah, just Ludens, Morello. Ludens, Morello, probably Death Cap. Last Stand, more damage to champions while you're low on health. Huh. That's actually really interesting. I hadn't thought of Last Stand. Because that would trigger with your ult when you're dead, obviously. Let me look at that. That's some interesting technology. How much extra do you get? 5% increased damage to champions while below 60% of your max health. Up to 11%. Oh. While you're below 30%, huh? So that would really, like, do a lot of extra damage on your ult versus Coup de Grace does 7% if they're lower than 40% max health. Maybe Last Stand is the way to go if you're going to die anyways and you just want to be able to use your ult. I still see most people use Coup de Grace because that's, like, more useful if you're not dead. You know, to ult people across the map. I'd probably still go Coup de Grace, but if you think you're just going to be suiciding in team fights, then I could see something like Last Stand maybe. But I still think Coup de Grace is going to be a little bit stronger. But yeah, so one of the big changes was they decoupled stats from the runes. So now you can get 20 AP and go into precision. So you don't get that wasted attack speed. You get Presence of Mind, which is every time you get a kill or an assist, then it restores 20% of your maximum mana and 10% of your ultimate's cooldown. So routinely with your ult, you're going to get assists on 2 to 3 people almost every time. So that's effectively like 30% CDR on your ult. Then if you get Ulti Hunter, then that's going to be, you know, an additional 15% on your ult. And you can stack this really quickly because you're going to be getting kills and assists on unique champions across the map, like pretty quickly in the game, a lot of times with your ult. And so having both of these stacked up at level 11 mathematically ends up being somewhere, and if you have 20% CDR off of Ludens, then you're going to end up reducing the cooldown on your ult by somewhere around 50%. So and that's just assuming that you kill, you know, every time you ult, that you kill 2 people or get assists on 2 people. Then you'll end up with like it's like 180 base, and it goes down to about 90, like 93 seconds on your ult. So your ult's going to be up a lot, a lot with this build. And that's only assuming you get 2 kills or assists. If you get more, then it goes down even more. So I think still want to go Dark Harvest into Taste of Blood to give you some more sustain in the laning phase. Eyeball Collection, which, you know, is going to be pretty easy to stack. And then Ultimate Hunter, which is also going to be easy to stack. And then just Presence of Mind and Coup de Grace. So similar to Cassiopeia, you farm well, you have good mana management early, you have a really powerful ultimate, you scale extremely hard later on in the game. I mean, once you get 3 to 4 items, even if they kill you, even if they assassinate and pick you off, you can still do a ton of damage off of your ult. It's just going to do like 50% of the enemy team's health or more as the game goes on. So I still think that Karthus is going to be fantastic in this meta. He farms really well, he pushes. This is actually like decent utility, right? So for the duration, people who run across it are slowed for 4 seconds, reduced by 50% over the first second, and decaying over its duration. Okay. So I guess they're slowed by whatever, 40%, but then after 1 second, it deletes. Still, 20% for 3 additional seconds is huge, and they lose 15% of their magic resist. So this actually has like decent utility for like running people down or kiting or whatever. So good champ, you know, good scaling, takes Barons quickly, takes Dragons quickly, does very high sustained damage in team fights, has great utility with his ultimate, awesome scaling. Fantastic champion in the bot lane right now. and has that high base damage. Once again, you know, even just like level 2 or level 3, just spamming Qs on people can do a lot of damage early on, especially if you like Wall of Pain and then you have like a Thresh to hold them still, or a Leona. You hit them with, you know, 3 Qs, they're going to be dead early on. So very strong champion. Twitch is another one who's been moving up the ranks quite a bit lately, and I moved Twitch up. I think he was tier 2 last time. I just put him in tier 1. The reason is now enchanters are going to be a lot better to protect him. So if you have a Janna or a Nami or something like that with you to get you through the first part of the laning phase, he's going to be much stronger. And he has a really nice 1, 2, 3 item power spike. You know, once he gets to Blade the Ruined King, Hurricane, and then Infinity Edge, he does a ton of damage. So I think that Twitch is still going to be strong. You just have to get through the laning phase. He doesn't do a lot early, so that is kind of a little bit of a knock to him. But he can also get back into the game really easily. As I always say about Twitch, you've got that invisibility. You have that steroid off of your ult, which scales extremely well with Ardent Sensor. Remember that your ult triggers on hit. So when you hit everyone on their team with this, it's going to stack the poison on them from your passive. It's going to trigger Blade the Ruined King on everyone that you hit. It's going to trigger Hurricane on everyone that you hit. And it's going to trigger Ardent Sensor on everyone that you hit. So those are 4 different things that interact with your ultimate. And then Ardent Sensor, of course, is going to give you more attack speed as well. So you get all those triggers and you get more attack speeds. You can land more autos, which is even more triggers. And so that item is just insanely good on Twitch. And if you have something like a Janna or a Lulu can speed him up so that he's going to attack even more. And then Janna could give him extra AD, which is going to make his attacks, of course, do a lot more damage. So really strong champ. Has a decent escape with his ambush if he gets ganked. If he sees it coming fast enough, he can obviously sneak up on people and assassinate. So even if he falls behind in the lane, if you get decent vision, you can find ways to get picks and get back into the game later on. Really good positioning in team fights because you can roll up invisible, wait on the enemy to waste some of their CC on one of your frontliners, and then you just show up, pop your ult. They no longer have their CC. Great, everybody's dead. And it resets. So if you kill somebody in a team fight, you can also go invisible again, reposition, get this attack speed buff again, and then start going to work after that again. So very, very strong at team fighting, assassination, you know, roaming, scaling. He's got it all except for early game. He is weak in the early game. But if you have an enchanter, you know, like a Nami, then she can probably get you through the early game. Especially if they also have an enchanter. If they have a Janna or something, you know, they're pretty much going to be giving you the early game for the most part. So it's very nice that people are rotating away from the Leonas, from the, you know, a little bit from the Threshes. Thresh is still going to be the most popular support right now, but people are starting to move away from those all-in champs, moving towards enchanters a little bit more, and that plays right into Twitch's game, both because he's good with them and he's good against them because they're not going to all-in him early. Okay, and then Draven, you know, if you're really good on Draven, he could always be tier 1. He still does a ton of base damage off of his Q. During the laning phase, he scales really heavily. If you know, land your autos, get those kills, get that extra gold. Extremely strong item power spike once he gets Storm Razor. He can also go for a more sustained build, so he can get, you know, something like either a Bloodthirst or a Death Stance early if you're against a heavy poke lane. That can be helpful. So, just really good champion overall. Great bully in the early game. Really good against Twitch. He can hold his own against Lucian. Good against Xayah. So, I think Draven's still going to be quite strong. And then once we get down into tier 2, these champions are still okay. I think that these are almost always where you want to be. If you can play any of these champions and they're up, I would definitely play one of these. Because, like I said, I think that AD carries in general feel very underpowered right now compared to other roles. I wasn't sure about that. You know, I thought maybe they are, maybe they aren't. But just looking, I had a really bad night last night in terms of ranked. But just overall, just reflecting and thinking on it, I just almost very rarely see my AD carry just go off and take over the game by himself. It does happen occasionally, but I feel like it happens much more often in one of the other roles. So Jhin is somebody who is very strong. He can take over games. He has really good synergy if you have all-in supports. So if you have something like a Xayah or a Brand, and they land one of their stuns or roots, and he follows it up with a W, you can burst people out really quickly. He's good with things like Leona, Thresh, And he's particularly good with things like Lux and Xerath, Vel'Koz, those really long-range AP champs. Now, those are falling out of favor a little bit after the nerf to Dark Harvest, but those champions are still like relatively good counter picks to Zyras, to Brands, because they outrange them. And Jhin fits in very well with that. I mean, when someone like Xerath is channeling his ult and then Jhin channels his ult, that's a disgusting combo because Jin's hitting them to slow them down, and that's going to let Xerath hit them with all of his stuff too. So he does definitely have some really good combinations with some of the other all-in and poke champs. He scales really well off of Storm Razor and then Rapid Fire Cannon. He moves around really quickly. He bursts out squishies really well because he has, you know, really high single item power spike, single item burst, so he can kill things like Kha'Zix really well. He isn't as good against tanks, but people aren't playing tanks as much. We'll see next patch if Sejuani and Ornn come back into the meta. But right now, he's still okay. He's a good combo mage, good aggression early. I'd still rather probably play Lucian or Draven if you're proficient on those, but Jhin can still be very strong. He is going to be a force in the early game. Now, Kaisa, I moved up a little bit here just because Enchanters are coming back, and she's one of the highest scaling AD carries in the game, so she's still going to be super popular. Her win rate's not amazing right now. It's like 50%. But she does scale really well. You know, if she gets her Gensus and then gets, you know, Storm Razor, and then I think she gets, like, Hurricane after that a lot of the times. Let me see here. I think a lot of people have gone away from the AP build where you used to get, like, Nashor's Tooth and Death Cap and that type of stuff because they nerfed her AP ratios a while back. Yeah, or Rapid Fire Cannon. Yeah, a lot of people go either Storm Razor, Gensus, and then either Hurricane or Rapid Fire Cannon. I mean, you can still go the Nashor's Death Cap. You saw it worked here. Well, he lost the game, so it didn't work for him, but he used it there, I should say. So some people still go that bill if you're overloaded on AD. Then that is an AP option that's still on the table. So she does scale really well. She has pretty strong utility in that she can jump around and dodge stuff. She gets a nice shield. Does pretty good burst damage, you know, with her Q if you get somebody isolated. So she's still going to be pretty good, just not as strong as she was. She's going to have a weaker laning phase. I'd probably rather play Twitch if you just want a weak laning phase, but she does have higher upfront burst than Twitch if you get an isolated target with your Q. And if you upgrade that Q early on, which I think is becoming more popular because people are rushing Storm Razor, and I think you get your Evolve off of just Storm Razor and Runes. Not 100% about that. I have to double check that, but I think that's how that works. And yeah, then I think you go like, I don't know if you get the Evolve. You might have to get a Pickaxe. You might have to go Storm Razor, then Pickaxe. I'm not entirely sure about how the math on that works out. I think you do have to go Storm Razor, then Pickaxe in order to get the Q Evolve. Then once you get Gensus on top of that, I believe that will give you the other Evolve. If you go Berserkers, which will give you 35%, 35%, that's 70%, and then Gensus would give you 95%. So if you can get an extra little bit of attack speed off of your runes, or an extra dagger or something like that, then you can get your E evolved and your Q evolved pretty quickly. So yeah, still going to be a strong champ, a little bit weaker in the early game, but great if the game goes long. Okay, Misfortune, still going to be pretty good. You know, you can harass with her early. She does have good teamfight presence with her ult. She doesn't work as well with enchanters as other champions do. She's pretty good with Sona because Sona can hold them still with her ult, and Sona can double down on the hard harass early. But she's not as good with Ardent Censer, obviously, just because she's going to be casting her spells instead of auto-attacking most of the time. And she does have a lethality build, which is nice early, but kind of can potentially fall off a little bit later if you get some other people that have more armor. But she's pretty good. She's low mobility. I mean, she has good sustained mobility. Like, she can run around the map, but she can't really dash around to dodge stuff and fight. So she's kind of a sitting duck for assassins or, you know, poke, skill shot type of champions, hooks, things like that. So she's okay. You can still be aggressive early, but, you know, I'd rather play Lucian, Draven, Jhin, something like that if you want an early game bully, but she's still all right. All right, Varus is another one who is becoming a little bit more interesting. They did buff him on this patch, and I have seen, at least on op.gg, a little bit kind of a, well, not here, but I had been seeing some people trying out the lethality build again with him. Looks like most people aren't doing that here, like the Bjergsen did in this game. That might have been like a mid lane Varus. So it looks like most people are still doing the Blade of the Ruined King build, where it's just Blade, Gensu's, and eventually Hurricane, and then you just rely on like really fast attack speed off lethality. I do think that the poke build is probably better. I mean, it's more interesting right now, is what I feel like. So I think that like going something like Dark Harvest, Taste of Blood, Eyeball Collection, Ravenous Hunter, and then Mana Flow Ban and Absolute Focus. This will give you really nice poke with the Dark Harvest because you can use your arrow to trigger it really easily, or your E. And then this gives you a lot of sustain in lane off of your arrows and Ravenous Hunter, and then Eyeball Collection is just okay. And then you still get your Mana Flow Ban and Absolute Focus. Now, some people do go for Comet instead with that. You don't have ways to like lower the cooldown on Comet reliably though, so I don't know. We'll see. He's probably still a little bit underpowered, you know, off the radar, but I think that he could be better than he has been in a while off of this change. Because if you hit somebody, if you activate your W, then hit them with an arrow, it can do up to 21% of their missing health, which is obviously quite a bit of extra damage in addition to the normal damage that the arrow does. So this thing can hit for like, you know, 800 or something to execute people once you get a couple of items. So, and then you just go lethality. You just go Ghost Blade, Dust Blade, Edge of Night, and then eventually just like a Last Whisper item. So, let me see. It's not showing us on that pro builds, but I was seeing it quite a bit on the pro builds that u.gg was demonstrating here. Yeah, this type of stuff here where, you know, he's going Comet, but then just like Ghost Blade, Dust Blade, Edge of Night, Caulfield's Warhammer, and Lord Dominic's Regards. They get this strictly just for the 10% CDR, just so you hit 40% CDR, because Edge of Night doesn't have CDR on it. But, you know, these were kind of older builds. You know, the proper pro builds has stuff that's like much more up to date, like played in the last day or so. So, I don't know. I guess this, I mean, so many people are using this build that this is probably still correct. The lethality build is interesting. But either way, you can tinker around with him, try him out. He's okay. I think you can win games with him on the lower side of tier 2. At least he like has stuff he can do early on with his arrows, with his E, which has free Grievous Wounds on it, so you don't have to go buy Executioners. You know, his ult has really nice utility and just got 50 more damage on it. So he's okay. I don't think he's going to be oppressive or like over the top powerful right now. But I think he's decent. And then Tristana is someone else that I moved up a little bit from tier 3 to tier 2. I still don't think she's insanely good, but she's getting there, right? She got more damage on this patch from her bombs, which is pretty significant, you know, getting the 2.86 AD ratio versus what it used to be, 2.42. So nice scaling, and then also higher base damage. So that's nice. Remember, this not only works against champions, it also works against towers. So you can take towers really quickly with her. If you get ahead, you can jump forward on people and throw the bomb on them, and you have really, really good all-in. If you get a couple of items early or you get ahead, you get a kill or two, you get the BF sword, they come back with a long sword or whatever, and you jump on them. You can force action with her, which is pretty nice. You get resets on your jumps. You can reposition in team fights pretty easily. You can dive pretty easily, so you can jump in, finish them off, and then jump back out. You have really nice hook protection with her jump as well, because as most people know, it buffers, which makes her unstoppable. So whenever you start your jump, like the motion to jump, even if you get hooked, you're still going to be able to jump out of it. So it's kind of like an Ezreal Arcane Shift, and there's a couple other champions that have that in their kit. But Tristana just looks obnoxious with it, because it's like, I just hit you with a hook, and then you still get to jump out of it anyway. So she's infuriating to play against a good Tristana that had, if you're one of those hook type of champs. And then she scales really well. You know, her Q gives you like 110% attack speed still, I think. They may have dialed that back. I think it used to be 130. and they nerfed her back in the day. She was super oppressive in Season 7, the back half of Season 7. She was pick ban every game. It was like Caitlyn for the first half of the year and then Tristana for the second half of the year. So if crit items come back, then she's somebody who's going to be very, very strong with that because she doesn't have any good on-hit interactions, right? So like Blade of the Ruined King's not going to be amazing on her. It's good on champions like Xayah. Well, Xayah doesn't get it that often. She could. A lot of people don't get it on her. But like on Kog'Maw, on Varus, on Twitch, because they have on-hit effects, right? Like Twitch has his Poison, Kog'Maw has his Bioarcane Barrage, or whatever it is, his W. Then Varus is going to have his Corruption stacks. But she doesn't have any of that. So it's not as good on her. So you don't get Blade of the Ruined King on her. But Stormrazor's okay. It's just she's like the premier sustained damage, late game tank breaking, you know, repositioning type of champ. She has, you know, not only just the rocket jump to escape or to use offensively in some situations, but also her buster shots on a fairly low cooldown. It does 300 base damage, so she has really nice all-in potential if you jump on them, you know, drop the explosive charge, hit them a few times, and then blow them up with the buster shot if you have like an all-in support. She does have quite a bit of threat at level 6. This also keeps her safe. It knocks back all enemies. People forget this sometimes. I've had people say, because I've talked about on stream, man, she just blew all of us back. And they'll say, but it's single target. It's like, it is. That's true. It only does damage to one of them, but it knocks them all back. So you can knock an entire team back with the Tristana with that ult. Like, fun tip, this doesn't come up a lot, but if you have something like a Veigar support, you can knock them into the wall as well, which I was playing against that last week during Viewers Night, I think, and they didn't do that once. The Tristana just let us sit in the middle of the circle and, like, you know, attack them, cast spells on them, dodge Veigar's stuff, when she could have just ulted us back into the Tristana wall and it would have stunned us. So that's just a fun tip there, fun fact. So, yeah, she's very versatile. She's got the defense. She's got the offense. She takes towers really quickly off of explosive charge, which is very nice right now with the tower plating. She scales extremely well. She gets a lot of range as the game goes on. Big problem is she only starts with 525 range, but, you know, Lucian only has 500 range. Xayah only has 525. The problem is those champions are a little bit better in the early game than she is, potentially. If you get ahead, once again, Rocket Jump can be good. I mean, it's 85 base damage. It slows them, and you get a reset on it. So if you jump on them and then like get a full tick of explosive charge, I think you have to attack 4 times to get the tick. And then once that blows up, then you get a reset and you can jump again. And then if you kill them, you can jump again after that. So I think she's super, has the potential to be super strong with just a couple more buffs, or if crit items start coming back, if they buff them, which they've said they're probably going to do over the next couple of patches. So right now she's hanging out at tier 2. She is very good with champions like Janna, with champions like, you know, Lulu, Nami, just because she gets that huge attack speed steroid with Ardent Sensor, which means she's going to be hitting more with Ardent Sensor. So she just doesn't have as much like upfront damage built into her kit. She has to auto attack. And as we talked about earlier, fights are just over before she can land those auto attacks for 5 seconds, you know, in a late game team fight. So he just doesn't have that much upfront damage like some of the other champs, but she can still work. And then finally, tier 3 here. So we have Caitlyn. I think Caitlyn, most people are just really bad on Caitlyn. Like, she can work well. She does have great range. She has great zone control with her traps, but people just don't use that correctly. If you play Caitlyn, you must auto attack the enemy a lot in the laning phase. You must push. You must take towers really quickly. I had a Caitlyn on my team that just sat with full mana the whole time, and we got pushed in by like an Ezreal. Or it was like Ezreal Braum pushed us in when it was like Caitlyn Nami. And I was trying to go up and harass and, like, auto-attack our minions as much as possible, right, to help the lane push. And she's just sitting there, like, literally just last hitting with Caitlyn. And that's, like, the worst thing you can do. So you must be aggressive. You must get advantages early. If you don't do that, you will fall behind. You will lose most games. She starts to get scary again at, like, you know, 4 items. But really, she's just, like, a single item, like half an item power spike. You get your BF sword, you need to start punishing. Because she just takes so much longer to come online. And the big reason that Caitlyn does fall off is she doesn't have a lot of like guaranteed upfront damage. She's got her headshot, right? If they step on a trap, she can do good damage, but you have to combo it correctly, right? You have to auto attack and then E backwards, hit them with a net, and then while you're Eing backwards, hit them with a Q, because you can do that animation. Like you net back, and then you start your Q animation while you're netting back, and then hit them with one more auto. So whenever they step on a trap, it should be a minimum of 2 headshots. It should be, you know, 1 headshot when they step on it, and then you have to get a second one too by hitting them with your E after that, ideally. Or, you know, at a bare minimum, it should be hit them with a Q and a headshot. Just a headshot, not okay. Not enough damage. But she doesn't have steroids in her kit, right? So her ultimate is something that's channeled, that's really long range. You can't do this in a really long team fight. It's nice for sniping people out. But, you know, it's not going to be a huge power spike at level 6 most of the time in the same way that some of these other champions are going to have a huge power spike at level 6, right? And she doesn't have anything that gives her extra attack speed. She has one of the slowest base attack speeds in the whole game, 0.56, which is like super slow. You know, a lot of other AD carries are going to have like, you know, a 0.65 or something like that. So they're going to be doing a lot more auto attacking than she is. So she doesn't have anything that gives her a ton of extra AD. She doesn't have any attack speed. She doesn't have any sort of, you know, abilities that stack up. It's just strictly, you know, can you poke with your auto attacks and position really well around your traps? And if they step on your trap, then you can maybe burst them out. But she's mostly just push and poke. So it requires a very specific, hyper-aggressive playstyle early to make this work. But it could work. Now, the runes that I've been seeing lately on her, a lot of people are going Grasp of the Undying, Shield Bash, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, and then Overheal and Coup de Grace. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't realize about Shield Bash and Overheal is that if you heal yourself past your maximum amount, that counts as giving you a shield, and that will trigger Shield Bash. So you can land that extra auto attack against the enemy. If they hit you back, or even if the minions just hit you back a little bit, slightly break your shield, then you trigger another Grasp, you heal past 100% again, you get another shield. So if you can just continually float between like 99% health and then 101% health with your shield, just so like incrementally jumping over that line over and over again, then you're going to continually get the Shield Bash for the extra damage. So that's kind of a combination I haven't seen a lot of people doing, but particularly if you have a healing support with you, if you have a Sona, a Nami, something like that, then they can usually top you off, and you'll get that extra Shield Bash trigger in there. So Shield Bash doesn't do enough damage right now, I don't think. It should do at least 8 when it triggers, but I think it starts off at a lot less than that. Yeah, it starts off at 4, which is like super anemic, I think. But it's still okay. You know, it still does some extra damage. So it's all right. And then people are going Grasp just because you can trigger it so easily and so often because you're going to be hitting the enemy. Fleet Footwork is nice if you're just going to be hitting like minions with it. Obviously, it's better if you hit enemies. It does give you move speed too, which is nice. But this does give Caitlyn permanent health, and it allows you to take stuff. You can take Demolish instead of Shield Bash if you want. The problem with Demolish is you have to walk into 600 range, which is closer than her max range. So, you know, Demolish will help you take the towers quicker. So if you don't want to play that little Shield Bash mini game, you can still just go Demolish instead. And then you get a little bit better trading power with Bone Plating and Overgrowth. So, and it does make you a little bit tankier in the mid game. Not by a ton, but you'll have a few, you know, maybe 200, 300 extra HP in the mid game because of Grass, because of Overgrowth. So, it's all right. And she just doesn't scale very well with attack speed. I guess this is like, you know, so things like Alacrity is not going to be that great on her. Coup de Grace can still be okay, you know, for finishing people off with your poking, but I still think that something like Overheal, if you're going to go Grasp, is going to be better. I know that was hot for a while. I think people might still be going for that build. People may have switched back to Fleet Footwork, but yeah, it looks like pretty much everyone switched back to Fleet. I know people were toying around with Grasp, so it looks like everyone's back to Fleet, so maybe you should just go for the traditional Fleet build these days. But I just want to throw it out there. It is something interesting to think about. And then just Storm Razor, Rapid Fire Cannon, Infinity Edge. Okay, Sivir is okay. You know, she's got good wave clear. She has good utility with her ult. You can block stuff with your spell shield. She's pretty weak early on just because she has really high mana costs. She is fairly short-ranged, and her abilities don't do a ton of damage. It's okay. But she's very good like later on with 3-item power spike because your Storm Razor When you first auto attack a minion wave with your ricochet, it'll crit on every single minion, which goes through, which is going to be really strong if you get Infinity Edge also later on. So she's all right. Good scaler. You can get back into the game with like power farming later if you fall behind early. So if you're auto filled, she's one of the better choices you can pick. Xayah is okay. She's good if you have Rakan on your team. Rakan's not as popular right now just because he doesn't have as much lane presence, but he could potentially be strong. And then she has good zone control. The problem is if you look at her kit, like part of what made her really strong in the past is her scaling with crit. And that kind of scaling doesn't work with Stormrazor. Like Stormrazor is such a weird item because it like applies a crit. So if people have special interactions with like a critical strike itself, like Jhin, for example, then it's going to be pretty good. But Xayah has scaling with her E based on crit. So you want to be able to get to critical items as fast as you can, but you can't do that now because you have to go Stormrazor early. So your first item is not going to scale like very much with your Blade Caller effect. Whereas back in the day, you know, you would get something like BF Sword into Zeal, and then you would finish Infinity Edge, and then usually Static Shiv after that. And then boom, you have your 50% crit. And that would do a ton of extra damage off of your Blade Caller. So these things, like the feathers themselves, don't crit, but they scale off of crits. That's like a really weird interaction. She does have good wave clear off of her double daggers, which is nice. She does have some safety off of her Featherstorm, but she could use a little love. She's not as strong as she used to be. I think this should probably go down to like 120-second cooldown. They're thinking about changing her Blade Caller to where it doesn't scale with crit anymore, and they want to do something else instead, which I think is smart. It's just a really weird interaction. But she's okay. You can definitely win with her. She's really good in team fights. She's kind of like a Twitch light. Like I think she's a little bit stronger in the early game than Twitch is, and she has more safety on her Featherstorm. Her like, you know, top end damage is not going to be as high, and she can't go invisible. But it's similar in that you're throwing out a lot of feathers and you're creating a nice zone of control. And these feathers have pass through as well, so they can hit multiple targets. Now, another thing that would be interesting is if they had the feathers, if they made it to where they could apply on-hit effects. That would be something that would be intriguing, but it doesn't do that. So it can penetrate through stuff, but it specifically does not apply on-hit like Twitch. Twitch's ultimate is unique in that it applies on-hit effects. So I think that would be cool if they made clean cuts apply on-hit effects, because then she could get Blade of the Ruined King and get some really nice scaling in that way. And I think that would be a very interesting build with her, because she would like a lot of attack speed. You know, she could, if that happened, she could go for something like Blade of the Ruined King Ginsu's build, which I think would be pretty neat on her. I guess the Ginsu's wouldn't give you extra feathers, but I don't know. I would like it if it had pass-through damage. I think that would open up some interesting builds on her, but either way, doesn't exist that way. So she's okay. She's a nice zone of control mage. Good if you have Rakan, because you get the extra damage off of your W. You get the extra, you know, however much. If Rakan is near, he gains Deadly Plumage, and you get an extra, I think, 20%. What, did they take that off? Creates a cause her basic attacks to do this. Deadly Plumage strikes an enemy. She gains 30%. Blah, blah, blah. Did they take that out? Did I miss that? Or am I just, like, not reading this correctly? I thought she got extra damage. I thought she did, like, 20% extra damage or something if Rakan was close. Did they... Let me see. I gotta know this now. Did I miss that from back in the day? Okay, so pass-through damage is reduced from 50%. Okay, so it used to do 50% all levels. I forgot about that nerf on patch 8.8. So that was a pretty big nerf to her wave clear specifically. When Deadly Plumage is active on both Xayah and Rakan, when one of them basic attack the enemy on their own, Deadly Plumage strikes that enemy from both of their Deadly Plumage. Is that what they changed? Okay, this is how it used to read. He will also gain Deadly Plumage, causing each of their attacks to conjure a second lesser bolt. Okay, so they nerfed that interaction. I could have sworn it was something like she got extra damage if he was close, but maybe it only applies Deadly Plumage to both people. Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Anyway, she's okay. You can still win with her, but she's more conditional than she used to be. Okay, Ezreal is something that a lot of people are going to debate and argue about on tier list. I personally, I don't even want to put him on the tier list, but I'll put him on there out of respect. I just like every Ezreal that I see is just a hot pile of garbage most of the time. Like this champion, he does like it takes him so long to come online. He has tier to get, and then he usually gets something like Iceborne Gauntlet after that, or maybe even Trinity Force, but that still takes a long time to get. He does get a lot of extra gold early with Kleptomancy, so if you're constantly hitting your Qs, you know, you can get a lot of extra gold in the early game. Now, once he gets to the mid game where he has, you know, his Muramana plus either Trinity or Iceborne Gauntlet, then he's pretty strong, you know, at like 20 to 25 minutes. But the problem is getting there. And the issue with Ezreal is, like, you're giving up so much damage, like relatively guaranteed damage off of some of these other more reliable champions in order to have extreme safety. So your E not only is like a blink, but sort of like Tristana, you can it buffers and it can just get you out of stuff. So if Blitz hooks you and you E immediately, you can actually get out of the hook with that. So he should, in theory, be one of the safest AD carries. You know, he can last hit minions from however long away, like 1,200 away. You know, he's got his Arcane Shift, which ends up being on like a 5-second cooldown later on for a blink because he's going to be, you know, hitting people with his Qs, which is going to lower the cooldown on all of his other abilities. He's going to get some decent CDR off of things like Iceborne Gauntlet early on, and or Trinity Force. So he has the utility, he has the poke. If you consistently hit your Qs, especially if you can hit your WQ combos, he can do quite a bit of damage early on, and he kites well, and he does, you know, he does very good poke. He can be very oppressively strong and just like unstoppable if you're really good on him. The problem is most people are not really good on him. You know, he takes a lot of skill. You have to not ever get hit with anything, like I just talked about, but then you have to hit, you know, at least 50% of your Qs or more. You know, you got to be able to land your true shot barrages. He's got a lot of stuff about him, right, that can be powerful, but if you're not hitting your stuff, if you're getting hit by enemy things, then you're better off just playing somebody with more raw power that requires less finesse. So I think that going something like either Ninja Tabby or Ionian Boots is good. Muramana, Iceborne Gauntlet, Blatherin King, and then I like getting double tier for Seraphs. If you don't have time for double tier, then you can get something, you know, like maybe a Last Whisper item for some extra penetration on your Qs. So he's okay. You know, you can make him work. Klepto, Magical, Dematerializer, Cosmic, and then Mana Flow and Transcendence are very nice. Then when you overflow on your CDR later on, which you're going to do with your double tier because you're going to have Seraphs plus Iceborne, then it'll convert it over to AD. So can be a good champion in theory. At top level play, if you just need a really safe AD carry, you know, he can be very strong, but he's super popular, like 2,400 games played recently at a 50% win rate. So he's just a decent, you know, a decent sort of AD carry that is safe pretty much. But I just see so many bad Ezreals that, and I mean, the stats are borne out with that too. Like he's a very popular champion. But his win rate's gone up a little bit. He's like a 49% win rate, but super popular. So he's all right, but you got to be really, really good on him. And then Jinx is like another like powerhouse AD carry. You need a lot of items to make her work, but she does have some good wave clear early on with her rockets. She does have good follow-up CC with her Chomper, so if Thresh hooks somebody, you can chomp them, or Leona engages on somebody, you can chomp them. But by and large, if you want someone that's just kind of weaker early that's going to scale, I'd probably rather play Twitch, or maybe even something like a Tristana, just because Tristana is safer. Like Jinx is going to have a little bit better of an early game. She can get more damage with her rockets. She can wave clear better with her rockets. She can snipe out some kills with her ultimate. But I think that Triss is just going to be a little bit safer as that goes. Or something like Kaisa, who's going to hyperscale later on. So Jinx does have a kind of a specific niche where she has long range, AoE, you know, rockets that scale very, very well with Hurricane, because each one of those little mini rockets that you fire does AoE also. So she does a ton of AoE damage in team fights once she gets her Hurricane. But, you know, once again, she's not amazing with Storm Razor. She's okay. But if we get the traditional crit builds back, if we get a build that's like Zeal item into Infinity Edge, then she'll definitely be a lot stronger. So we'll see. Hopefully they bring that back sometime between 9.1 and 9.3. Then we'll see more things like Jinx and Trist come back into the meta, which I would like. Okay, and then finally a couple honorable mentions. I mean, I'll mention Ashe here. She does have a good win rate. Overall, she's got 53.5% win rate. You know, she does have good utility with her arrow. Her Blade of the Ruined King power spike is pretty nice. She does have nice zone of control with her slows. Those slows are really good with mages as well. You know, if they're going to take a Leandries, the slow is nice for the extra damage. But she's all right. She does have good range as well. I think she's got 600 range, so you can poke early in her ass. So the long range is going to help you take towers. You do have good wave clear with your W. So, you know, you could make it happen with Ashe. I don't even remember if I had this. I do have it updated, I think. It's been a while since I've updated her page. But, yeah, so that 600 range is pretty sweet. See, she's got a 0.65 attack speed versus Caitlyn's like 0.56. So she can put out decent damage. You know, you're just going to go Blade of the Ruined King plus Hurricane. And she has really good utility with her Enchanted Arrow. So if you hit your arrow all the time, if you're really good at tracking the jungler with Hawkshot and communicating with your team, then she can have good utility. And then as you level this up, it scales tremendously high because you get the cooldown reduction. Oh, hi. Is that Santa's little helper? You want to come over here? You want to show the video? You drinking your milk, Rory? Got your little elf hat? Baby. Yeah.
The baby on the screen.
Baby. Is that a baby, Rory? Yeah.
No. Ooh.
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 You want to...
She wants to play with the keyboard.
She wants to play with the keyboard. Not yet, Rory. You'll be a great streamer one day, Rory, but... not just yet. Got her little elf hat. Can we put the hat up a little bit?
I mean, it's an adult hat, so it's big on her, but yes.
Okay.
She's done with the hat.
All right, all right. I got to finish up this video, but we got a little guest appearance.
Up. She hears some buttons.
That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine, isn't it, Rory? She says, "Yeah, I guess."
Okay. We just wanted
It's
to
a
say
baby.
night, Dad.
It's a baby. Good night, Rory.
Say bye-bye.
You drinking some milk for bed?
Say bye-bye.
Does Mommy want to wear the elf hat?
No, I'm good.
Does Sadie want to wear the elf hat?
Sadie's like, what are y'all getting me into?
You want the elf hat, Sadie? Anyways, sorry, little aside there. Can I wear the elf hat? I don't know if I can fit it over me. Okay. Night. Love you. So yeah, she could be okay. Heimerdinger, if you're awesome on Heimer, I guess you can play him in the bot lane. You know, whatever. I don't recommend that for most people, but if you one-trick him, he's viable bot lane. Vayne is somebody who I still think is pretty bad, although, honestly, maybe I should switch Vayne and Ezreal. I don't know. Both of them are rough, but at least Vayne, you know, I feel like she has more raw power when she hits her Blade of the Ruined King. It's just a lot easier. I think she's easier to play than Ezreal, honestly. Like, if you can just dodge stuff and just auto-attack, it's great. Like, Ezreal has to dodge stuff and hit his Qs. Vayne can just dodge and auto. So, anyway, she's okay. She can do high sustained damage. If we see tanks come back into the meta, she'll probably be better. You know, Swain, I would just play Cassiopeia or Karthus if you want a mage bot, but you want something a little bit tankier. Swain can still kind of work. He's good if you have an all-in support like a Xayah or a Brand, because you can combo together the CC, you know, with your ripping their soul out to pull them back in and then hitting them with your E. So he does have that going for him. And then Kalista, you know, if you're just a god on Kalista, I guess you could make her work, but she's got a lot of problems. She scales really, really poorly compared to some of the other champions. It just requires too many autos. Once again, if a champion requires a lot of auto attacks, they're probably not going to be that great in this meta. You need upfront burst damage most of the time. So Kalista seems like a champion that should, in theory, be pretty good because she's pretty mobile and like her ultimate allows you like pretty decent engages if you have a tank support like an Alistar. But in reality, she falls pretty far short of that. And I think, you know, stats aren't everything, but when someone's like down in whatever territory she's in, 45.5%, there's usually some pretty deep problems with that champion. So anyways, that's going to be it. Thank y'all very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like and subscribe and check out the other tier lists and other content on the channel as well. And I'll see you next time.